do it now. Do it for
Yeah.
free yourself. It should not take long. And then have the conversation. How do we want this to actually look? And do the two things match up, or is there a gap?
You're listening to Advised with Rick Lucchini.
All right, Hamilton, we're going to talk about estate planning today.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds boring, but it really can be a lot easier than some folks think or make it out to be. Why don't you tell me some of the stuff that you see in your practice that are some mistakes or some gaps that pre-retirees and retirees are coming in and you're noticing?
Yeah, man, that's what a great conversation for us to kick off with here as we're starting a new year, getting everybody to embrace thinking about our inevitable demise, or as I like to call it, the conclusion of your retirement.
There you
But yeah,
go.
you're right. I mean, something that I've started doing. I didn't do this at first when I was a financial advisor, and I've started doing it a lot more and consistently with every new client I'm onboarding. Is we want to review their estate plan, because that's really important, right? It's really important. Um, Not just who gets what, but who does what. And I would say probably the number one thing that I see that's maybe a mistake or just not done correctly from an estate planning standpoint. By and large, most families who I'm starting to work with, they don't have an estate plan at all. And I
Right.
think the national average is something like 60 to 70% of families don't have a documented estate plan. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think maybe one reason could be that people, just the word estate planning, you and I have talked about this a lot. That's a
Yeah.
daunting word. We had this perception that
Yeah.
getting an estate plan is for the ultra wealthy or people who have tons of assets to leave behind. So I think that there's maybe some stigma behind, I don't need an estate plan, I'm just a regular Joe Schmo.
Well,
But I think,
I think just opening that, I probably should have thought of a better way, and maybe I will. Uh, that sounds fancy. It sounds daunting. It
yeah,
sounds like you said, like I envision lawyer in a leather chair with my family surrounding me, bequeathing the beach house and all this other stuff. That's not us. We're just regular
yeah,
folks, middle class people trying to retire. And so why don't you just give me, like, real quick before we move on, why does the average person need an estate plan, and what actually, in short, is that? Because it
sure.
sounds fancy, but for regular people, it's not that fancy.
Absolutely. No, I think every person needs to have a documented estate plan. Some of the things that you would think of as being the things that, they're thinking a will and a trust, but really what it is as a couple, especially if you're married, having a conversation about, hey, at the conclusion of our retirement, who do we want to bless? Who gets what? And along the way, leading up to that, if we were ever in crisis, like in health crisis, or we, God forbid, had, our capacity was diminished where we couldn't make decisions, who were the people that we would trust to make important decisions regarding our healthcare treatment and regarding just managing our finances if we weren't able to do those ourselves. So it's
Okay.
putting the documents and the documentation in place so that while you're of sound mind and while you're healthy,
Yeah.
you're deciding who gets what and who does what as you approach the conclusion of your retirement.
Great. And it doesn't have, you don't have to have a $10 million estate for that to make sense for you. It should be literally everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. If you have young kids, you should be doing it. If
Yeah.
you're old and your kids have flown the nest, you should be doing it.
One of the things that I notice, and I know you do too, is something that's very simple. Anybody that's listening to this can turn it off or pause it and go fix it themselves for free right now,
Yeah.
is not having their beneficiaries correct or done
Hmm.
at all. And that means investment accounts, 401k is the big one, because like I signed up for that 7 years ago. I don't like, talk to me a little bit about beneficiaries, what people can literally go do right this second, and why it matters.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of times people don't realize, generally speaking, and there might be some exceptions to this, but generally speaking, having a beneficiary or a transfer on death or a payable on death on your account generally is going to supersede your will or your trust or anything else you've written. So
Yeah.
it's very important, especially for well, for all accounts, but especially for like retirement accounts that you can't transfer them to the ownership of your trust, really, to go ahead and list with the person, with the custodian that holds that retirement account, who's the person I want to inherit this if I pass away, and a lot of times go and add contingent, or we call third layer beneficiaries. If me and my spouse both pass away, I die, I leave my IRA to my wife. But let's
Yeah.
say she and I are both skiing together and we both die because we're horrible skiers. Now we're going to add the kids as the backup
Yeah.
beneficiary. And I see that not get done a lot. It doesn't get added to bank accounts sometimes. Bank accounts get forgotten, high yield savings accounts, or they won't add the contingent beneficiaries, or sometimes I've even seen where they accidentally will swap contingent and primary. Where like
Yeah.
now I've got my sister as
Yep.
my first in line, but my husband is
Yeah.
my second in line, and so or my wife is my second in line, so it kind of gets squirrely. So just making sure your
Yeah.
beneficiaries are right on all accounts, all life insurance, old accounts. That's pretty important. It's something that if you're not working with a financial advisor who refers reviews that regularly, you should be reviewing that every year. Just go through the account, make sure it still
Yeah.
matches your wishes.
Yeah. Some of the notables that get missed: 401k, old life insurance policies
Yeah.
that maybe you didn't even buy for yourself. It was a
Yep.
thing back in the day. Your parents were buying you a whole life policy. It sat in the safe for forever, and now they're still the benefit. They're deceased, and they're
Yep.
your beneficiaries. 401k, I put my parents on when I got the job because I was, living at home. I'm since married and have kids. I never went in and changed that. And my either my living or deceased parents are still my beneficiaries on my $500,000 401k
Yeah.
that really causes a lot of problems for my wife if I were to pass away. So check those out. You can do it yourself. It is free and it is super important because, as you said, in most cases, it's going to supersede the well drafted document that you just had a lawyer do.
Yep.
The beneficiary still takes over.
Big time, big time. And if you're auto
What?
enrolled in your 401k, they auto enrolled you, they didn't auto beneficiary you. So go check
That's
that stuff.
right.
So yeah,
That's right.
beneficiaries are a big one.
What else, buddy? What else when you're seeing people come in, especially in that retirement age?
Yeah.
What are they missing that just jumps off the page at you?
Here's a fun one. I see this a lot because a lot of times when people are like getting close to retiring, they've gone to a lawyer, they've seen, they might go with a trust and they've got a trust based estate plan, and they pay for, this great consultation, they get their trust done, and then they don't put anything in the trust. And
Yeah.
so I met with a guy once who spent like $15,000 on a trust based strategy with an attorney, and I'm sure it was great. But as we're going through his assets, his house is titled in his name, his brokerage, his investment accounts are titled in his name. Nothing's owned by the trust. So
Yeah.
getting a trust done, your trust really only has the authority to dictate what happens to the things that are in the trust. So if you're
Yeah.
going to pay to have your trust done, it really makes sense to chat with the attorney, find out which of my assets should go in the trust, which of them maybe shouldn't or couldn't, and go through the process of retitling those assets to the trust. Otherwise, it's possible you might have just spent a lot of money on time on some really fancy stationery.
Yeah. That's a good point, and we're gonna have another episode about will versus trust, who it's
Yep.
right for, and just go a little deeper into that. So if you want to hear it, subscribe, follow wherever you're at here. But why don't you just give us super like 10-second high level, somebody that's listening, why would I want a trust and what can that maybe do differently than somebody that has a will?
Sure. So generally speaking, a trust would allow you to skip probate. Um, by having a trust, you can very easily, if you want to make changes to who the beneficiaries are, or who's the trustee, who's in charge, being the executive of your estate, your power of attorney, stuff like that. You can make changes very easily just by amending your trust document. So sometimes it's a lot easier than adding changes to every single account. So people will create maybe like a living trust. They'll put their
Yeah.
house in it, they'll put their bank accounts in it. And that way, when they pass away, when they conclude their retirement, their trustee is able to come in and divide up the assets the way that they wanted them done very easily, while skipping the hassle of probate, which in Georgia is not usually that difficult or that expensive, although it's still a process. But in a
Yeah.
lot of states like California, it can be incredibly expensive and time consuming. And so, depending on where you live, a trust might make more or less sense for you. But across the board, generally, it is a very useful tool for helping your estate administration go smoothly
Yeah.
and for typically allowing you to skip the probate process just a little
And I
easier on
would
you.
add too, something that you mentioned, like for the house, or if you had a second property or
Yep.
camp or something in my area, a lot of people have camps. Uh, that's the way to essentially put a beneficiary on it, because you can't put a
Hmm.
beneficiary on your deed and your title.
Good
And if
point.
you name it to in the will, that's fine, but it still has to go through probate, and everything has to get held up, and you pay a
Sure.
lawyer to do it and all that sort of stuff. And the other one that I'd like to go in deeper on the next episode that we do this on is just special unique requests.
Yeah.
So and so gets this much at this date, but this one gets that, and it gets paid out over time, and all those unique things that you want to have happen.
Mm.
It's easier to spell it out in a trust and then have that taken care of.
Absolutely. That's a great point too. Yeah. Johnny gets $5,000 a month so far, so long as he stays in his AA meetings, kind of thing. Like
That's
in
right.
any kind
Yeah.
of weird scenario, a trust can be really helpful. And there's lots of different types of trust. We could do all episodes on just trust, all kinds of them.
Yep.
But
I
yeah,
don't
it's,
want to though. I don't.
yeah, that's right. That's fine. That's way beyond the scope of this call. But yeah, if you have a trust, make sure you fund it and make sure you
Well,
fund
we
it
touched
correctly.
we touched on it already, but I think another one, and probably besides not doing anything, one of the biggest ones that I see is just having those documents, and they're old.
Yeah.
They're irrelevant. You said, no, we did that. We took care of it. Rick, when we were 40, we're way ahead of you, buddy. We
Yeah.
did it. It's all good. Let's start talking about the stuff we care about, like show us how to pay for our Florida trip and all that other stuff.
Sure.
And the document is old, it's outdated. Your life has changed, your assets have changed. Um, how often are you seeing that? And give us a couple examples of it.
A lot, because a lot of people who get their will done do it when they have young kids. And so, like, the
Yeah.
main purpose of their estate plan is I need to name the second person in line to raise my kids if something
Mhm.
happens to me, especially like single parents. A lot of times they see the importance of that now.
Yeah, I'm 40. I have 3 kids. We're really concerned about what happens to the kids
Yep.
and all that sort of stuff. And we kind of like say, and all other assets get
Yep.
split equally or something like that, right? Because we don't have any assets. Fast
Hmm.
forward to 63, and all other assets are like a lot of different things that we feel
Yeah.
differently about. This belongs here, this belongs here. I might have grandchildren
Yeah.
that I want to include, and all this other stuff. So it your life changes, your estate plan likely will change. It doesn't mean that you need to throw everything away and go pay a lawyer a ton of money to start from scratch, but you might want to amend it, or like you said, update the documents. You mentioned Pennsylvania. I'm not going to quote the year because I don't remember it, but there was a change
Yep.
when you needed like a extra cover letter that said a certain thing and needed signed. And everybody before that year didn't have it, and they were invalid, and nobody knew. And
Yeah.
it's still causing a big problem because people are saying, oh no, we did that back when we were 30. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
42 years
Absolutely.
ago that changed, and now it's invalid, and it causes a lot of problems.
And as a shameless plug, if you're not going to re-review this every couple of years or have your attorney re-review it, work with a financial advisor whose part of their service offering is I'm going to systematically
Yeah.
re-review your estate plan and confirm that it still matches your wishes. And when it doesn't, I'll refer you out to the person who can fix that. So
Yeah, and you can do it now. Do it for
yeah.
free yourself. Just
Yep.
take the stuff out of the safe, dust it off. If you don't know who your beneficiaries are, look them up online. If you're not an
Yep.
online person, call like whatever. Figure it out yourself for free right this second. It should not take long. And then have the conversation. How do we want this to actually look? And do the two things match up, or is there a gap?
Absolutely. I think that's perfect, man. That's definitely the top most commonly seen estate planning mistakes that I see in my practice.
That you can fix
Yeah.
almost all of them yourself right now.
Just by having a conversation and just by looking at it. Literally, it's not even daunting. You don't have to call anybody.
All right, buddy.
Good
That's
talk,
a wrap.
man.
Thanks.
See ya.